Try something different tonight. We're going to be in front of the camera instead of behind it, and we're going to go step by step through teaching an old dog new tricks. If you, like me, and you grew up in the 80s, you got to see some of the filthiest and grimiest locomotives in Southern California, courtesy of the Southern Pacific. And I thought tonight we'd just do a bit of a throwback. We're going to do a bit of a midnight special scheme on an sd45, but the first thing we have to do is bring that sd45 kicking and screaming into the 21st century. So back in the day, you had a couple of choices. You had a Thurn Blue Box, or you had some very early Bachmanns, and one of my favourites was actually a Bachmann Plus. It was an sd45 Southern Pacific, and I happened to find a new old stock one, so I thought this would be a great video. So we're going to take this old girl, she's DC with a solid steel frame, and we're going to put some sound in it, and we're going to weather her up. Stay tuned. Made in 1995, this locomotive, so she's fairly old. So brand new, never used. Look, even still got the horn hook couplers in it, handrails. Okay, so I've already just pulled this apart just to make things a little bit quicker. And over there. So this is her, and a few details missing, but we'll get there. So we're going to pull the shell off. I've already pulled the light board out. We're not going to need that because we're going to be using brand new LEDs, and we also have a dual Shuku speaker and the fabled Tsunami 2 PNP8 decoder. So we're just going to pull this apart. So some of the things we're going to have to do to this locomotive, for example, is we're going to be isolating the frame. So we're going to be removing these tabs off the side of the trucks. We'll be soldering wires to those on both of them. The other thing we've had to do, and I did this earlier today due to noise restrictions, but we had to modify the frame. We took some meat out of the frame here so our new decoder can fit in there, and also so our speaker can fit in here above the flywheel. So that's what's happened with the frame. The other thing we will have to do is, obviously the frame used to be used to conduct power for the motor, so we'll be cutting these copper tabs off this motor, and we'll be soldering the wires orange and grey onto there as well. So the rest is pretty boring. There's not much talking, so let's just get to it.
A few moments later.
Probably wondering why I've used such heavy wire. This is an older locomotive, it's over 20 years old, and I'm expecting the amp draw to be a little bit higher, if not double, that of a conventional new ready to run locomotive. So we're going with a gauge 22 wire for the pickups and for the motor. Now the hole in the top here is for our speaker, and the notch back here is for the capacitors on the bottom of our decoder. So the decoder will sit here like this, and our speaker will sit in its slot there. There unfortunately is not much room for a keep alive. I'd have to chop the whole bottom of the fuel tank out to fit a keep alive in here. Even a small one, I'd have to remove a considerable amount of material. So this locomotive has 4-axle pickup out of its 6 axles, which is plenty. It's the same amount of pickup as any 4-axle locomotive. So we cut the strips off the trucks that rubbed on the bottom of the split frame to pick up and conduct power, and we've soldered on our pickups. We cut the strips off the motor and installed our motor wire pickups. And what we're going to do next is we're going to strip the ends of the wires, and we're going to do a continuity test to make sure that none of these wires are touching the frame. okay, inside the motor, because it is close. There was clearance, but we're just going to double check, because the last thing you want to do is put in a very expensive sound decoder only for it to go up and smoke because something's touching the frame. So once we've tested it, we will put insulation tape or some form of insulation through here for our decoder. We'll install our speaker and wire it up, and then we'll test it. On a side note, I'll probably be soldering onto this board. I don't recommend it, especially not with a powerful soldering iron. I have here a very small, light battery powered soldering iron that I'll be doing for that, but any manufacturer, including Thurn, will tell you not to solder to these because you do risk damaging them. But I've done a few now and I haven't had any hiccups, so here we go. Okay, so we've got our speaker installed, we've got our pickups wired, our motor wired, and now let's put on the track and see if it works. I'd call that a success. Our mechanism is sorted out. It's time to move on to the body. Now, any SB aficionado will realise there's something missing off the nose of this locomotive, but Bachmann did it first, because while I was looking on the internet I found a picture of a scale trains locomotive which was also missing the same detail, and that is the nose light. Unfortunately, the one I have is you can see that is too wide. It's too wide for the nose, so we're going to go the way of scale trains and just leave it out and pretend it's there. So the next thing to do is lights, LED lights. The back isn't too bad because of the volume of massive frame blocking the light. You're not going to see anything, so we're just going to end up gluing LEDs into the back of the lens in there. But the cab is a different story. Essentially, I've dismantled the cab and pulled the light boards out, and what we're going to do in this case is we're going to snap off the lenses for the actual headlights, because the headlights that I have lenses glued onto the ends of them anyway, so they'll go straight into the cab, and then we'll snap those off, and then the light boards will be reinstalled beside it. The reason we're not lighting the light boards or any other detail is because this is a locomotive essentially going to be soot black. The only thing you're going to really see on it is the glass, the SP on the nose, maybe not even the SP on the nose, and the white paint on the handrails where the engineer and brakeman have been touching it with their hands. Frank Keller Photography has a beautiful photo of a jet black Southern Pacific sd45 with the exact same thing going on. The only thing you can see on it is the white handrails on the pilots, and where they've wiped the number boards and the headlights and the glass so they can see out of it. So that's what we're going for, so we'll see how we go. way these are wired up. Now, because of the arrangement of this frame, this decoder is in backwards, so the front lights are wired up to the back output and the back lights are wired to the front output, but that's not really a problem. You can switch those around when you go to program it. Look at that, beautiful. Alright, so now that we have a beautifully running locomotive, we need to pull the detail parts on. So we've got our handrails, we've got our couplers, we've got a plough, we've got our sunshades, we've got our piping kits, we've got our fuel filler necks and gauges for the fuel tank. The only thing I don't have right now are the lift eyes for all the components on the roof and the window wipers. So unfortunately we can't put those on, but we'll be doing a few things with the shell. So we're cutting the step plates off the front of the locomotive to fit the plough. The cut levers are already on there obviously. So install the finer detail parts. The handrails probably last, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so here we are, it's done. We've got a plough on, MU cables on, handrails on. Handrails are a bit difficult. I suspect it's because they're almost 30 years old and they're a bit warped, but we've got them on with the horn, sunshades on, and got our tank details on. And so now we're going to get into weathering this locomotive along with its companion tunnel motor that's been hanging out on the workbench during this video. So we'll be starting off with the oily residue on top of the locomotives and the soot on top of the tunnel motor as well, and then we'll get really stuck into this one and dull it right down. Okay, so what we have our assortment of brushes we'll be using. We have our soot black, it's a matte black. We have rust brown, it's almost like a oxide brown for surface rust. We have a really orangey, almost bronze colour lacquer that we use for really bright rust. We have our road grime dusts, you know, the dusty sides of the locomotives and truck frames and areas like that. We've got our white for our handrails, and then when we're all done we'll seal it with a Tamiya finish, clear coat. This is a matte finish, and it's an aerosol. I tend to do this time of year when it's humid. I'll use an aerosol because the moisture in the atmosphere, if you airbrush on a flat white, sometimes it'll go a milky colour. That's because of the humidity and moisture. So this time of the year when it starts getting warmer, you start getting really humid days, I use aerosol.